The building did not welcome anyone. It rose from the street, like a verdict glass, stacked on stone. Marble pinned beneath steel, a geometry designed to feel inevitable. The lobby was the first argument it made. Clean lines, cold light, and a stillness that was not peace but control. The air carried the faint, antiseptic sting of a place that expected bodies to pass through without leaving a trace. Voices softened on instinct. Footsteps learned to behave. Overhead, fluorescent panels bled a flat brightness across everything they touched. No shadows to hide in, no warmth to gather around. Light without mercy. In the center, security sat like an altar built from counters and stanchions and laminated signs. The stanchions were chrome and polished, their belts black, drawing lanes through the lobby as if people were a liquid to be directed. The counters were pale stone, wiped so frequently that the surface had lost any sense of human history. Behind them, X-ray monitors glowed with their false greens and blues, skeletons of bags sliding past like quiet confessions. And above it all, cameras, black domes in the corners, lenses aimed with the patience of insects. They blinked, their small red lights hurried, indifferent. They did not intervene. They recorded. The building believed in documentation more than protection, evidence more than empathy. At 10:17 a.m., the revolving doors turned and released an older woman into that brightness. She moved with the calm precision of someone who knew how spaces worked. Not the calm of entitlement, which flared and demanded to be accommodated, but the calm of experience, measured, observant, unromantic. Her coat was a neutral gray, the kind that vanished against marble. Her hair was silver, cut short enough to be practical, soft enough to be overlooked. She carried a handbag that would not be remembered later by anyone who didn't need to remember it. There was no ID badge swinging from her neck. That mattered. Here badges were the lobbyist's small language of belonging. They flashed in the light on lanyards, tapping gently against suit jackets and blouse buttons as people walked. Some wore them with pride, like medals. Others wore them with resignation, like tags. But everyone wore them where they could be seen, because visibility here was a kind of currency. It purchased speed, distance, and assumption. This woman did not spend that currency in the open. She stood for a moment just inside the doors, letting the lobby show itself. The ceiling was high enough to make prayer feel foolish. The flags in their corner had no movement. The reception desk sat behind a pane of security, glass smiling faces printed on pamphlets stacked in neat rows. The real face behind them guarded and tired. A digital display over the elevators cycled through warnings and reminders in government font. Nitrogen monoxide weapons. Nitrogen monoxide photography. Report suspicious activity. The words were not instructions. They were a worldview. She stepped forward. Her shoes were sensible, leather well maintained, unremarkable, the kind of shoes people ignored. Yet, as they struck the stone, the sound was clean, deliberate. The lobby's acoustics magnified everything just enough to remind you that you were being heard, whether or not anyone listened. She followed the stanchions to the security checkpoint, joining the short line of bodies arranged in compliance. A young man in a navy suit ahead of her tapped his badge against the turnstile reader without slowing, as if the machine should feel honored. A woman behind her adjusted her lanyard and glanced up at the cameras, then quickly away, like someone avoiding eye contact with an animal that might bite. The older woman did not look at the cameras. She did not need to. She knew where they were. She knew what they did. She knew, in her bones, that cameras made people brave in the worst ways. Brave enough to act because they believed the recording would protect them. Brave enough to harm because they trusted the narrative afterward. When it was her turn, she placed her handbag on the counter with care. The security tray sat in front of her gray plastic, shallow, scarred, with thousands of passing objects. Keys, wallets, phones, belts, watches. The tray was an unspoken demand. Lay down the parts of yourself that might trouble the system. Strip your body of surprises. Prove you are safe by making yourself smaller. She slid the tray closer. Her hands were steady. A faint line of old scar tissue ran along one knuckle, pale against her skin. She removed her phone, a slim black rectangle, and set it in the tray. Then her keys, then a small, worn wallet. Each object landed with a soft, final sound. No jewelry, no fuss. The guard behind the counter, man with a shaved head and eyes trained into neutrality, watched her with the same expression he watched everyone. Not suspicion, not trust, something black, a practiced emptiness. "Ma'am," he said, voice flat. "Any electronics besides the phone?" "No," she replied. "One word. Enough. Her voice carried no tremor, no pleading. It wasn't defiant. It was simply precise. That, in this place, was often mistaken for insolence. The guard gestured toward the metal detector. She stepped forward, shoulders relaxed, posture aligned, hands at her sides. She moved like someone who had walked through thresholds that were less forgiving than this one. The machine waited, its black arch wide and patient. On the other side, a patrol officer leaned against a pillar near the turn, half watching the line, half watching the lobby beyond. He was young enough that his uniform still looked new, the fabric crisp at the seams. His shoes were polished to a shine that caught the fluorescent light and threw it back in hard flashes. He had the posture of someone taught to hold space, to widen his shoulders, to occupy the air. His radio earpiece curled into his ear like a private whisper. He kept one hand near his belt, the other resting against the edge of his vest. A stance not quite aggressive, but ready to become so at the slightest permission. His name tag read, Harris, a theft. Alert had come through 15 minutes earlier. It was minor. The kind of thing the building processed, the way it processed everything through forms and protocols and quiet escalation. Someone's badge had gone missing. Someone's wallet had vanished from a brick. The alert was vague. The description was thinner than an excuse. Older female, gray coat, carrying bag. Older female, gray coat, carrying bag. A category of person so wide it could swallow half the city. But the system did not mind vagueness when it could be sharpened into action. Officer Harris had repeated the description in his head like a mantra. He had looked around the lobby and felt the familiar itch of purpose. He was trained to look for wrongness, trained to believe wrongness always had a shape. He scanned for it, the way some men scanned for respect. Asterisk, asterisk. And then the revolving doors had delivered a shape that matched the words. An older woman, gray coat, carrying a bag. He watched her stand at the security tray, watched the way she moved to calm, too contained, not fidgeting like the others. He watched her hands place objects into the tray without hesitation, as if she had rehearsed the sequence. Rehearsed the thought pleased him. It gave him a story. Stories were fuel. The older woman stepped through the metal detector. The machine remained silent. No alarm. No red flash. The guard nodded. She passed without breaking stride. Retrieving her tray on the far side, Harris pushed off the pillar. Asterisk, the lobby did not change when he moved, but the air did. People felt uniformed motion the way animals felt a predator's attention. A few heads lifted. A conversation at the reception desk thinned into a hush. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to sharpen, pouring itself across his badge, his vest, the polished curve of his shoes. The woman collected her phone, keys, wallet. Her fingers were efficient, not hurried. She tucked the wallet away, slipped the keys into a pocket, held the phone for a moment as if considering something. Then she reached into the inner fold of her coat. Not for a weapon, not for anything dramatic. Asterisk. For an ID badge. It emerged on a thin clip. The badge did not swing. She kept it close, almost discreet, and turned it toward the reader at the turnstile. She did not look around to see who was watching. Harris saw the movement and misread it in the instant that mattered. Inner coat, concealed item, controlled posture. WRONGNESS. He closed the distance with the certainty of someone who believed the building wanted him to. He stopped a few feet behind her, close enough to cast a shadow onto the marble, one of the only shadows the lighting allowed. "Ma'am," he said. Door did not sound polite. It sounded like a door being locked. She paused, not frozen, not startled. A measured pause, as if acknowledging a sound in the environment. Then she turned her head slightly, not fully, not submissively. Her eyes met the space near his shoulder first, not his face. A habit, a choice, a refusal to be drawn into the performance of intimidation. "Yes," she said. Harris looked at her bag. The handbag sat on the counter edge, zipped, plain. There was nothing remarkable about it. That, too, irritated him, because it meant he would have to supply the remark himself. "Step aside," he said. One command. No explanation. Around them, the lobby held its breath. It always did. The building trained people to treat conflict like a spill. Don't touch it. Don't slip in it. Let someone paid for mess handle it. The woman's hand remained on her badge, still held near the reader. The turnstile's small green light waited. "I'm late," she said. 2 words. Not pleading, not arguing. A simple fact. Harris heard it as challenge. Behind him. The guard at the X-ray monitor glanced over, then back to the screen, as if deciding not to know. A clerk near the elevator shifted his weight, eyes fixed forward. A man in a suit took out his phone slowly, as if he were trying not to look like he was taking out his phone. Cameras blinked. Harris's shoes reflected the overhead light. bright as coins. The shine carried a kind of moral arrogance, the belief that if you looked like authority, you were authority. He adjusted his posture, making himself larger. He did not touch her yet. That restraint felt to him like generosity. "Ma'am," he repeated, and now the word was thinner, sharper. "You need to come with me." The older woman studied him fully this time. Her face was composed, but not blank. There was something in her expression that did not fit the lobby, a depth of calculation. A quiet patience that suggested she had seen men like this in rooms without windows. She did not fear him. She assessed him. That assessment had weight. She lowered her badge slightly, not hiding it, not offering it either. A small gesture, precise as punctuation. "No," she said. One syllable.com. Final. Silence. Hid the space like a dropped object. Was the kind of silence that made people suddenly aware of their own complicity, of how their still body became part of the architecture. The fluorescent light hummed. A phone screen brightened somewhere in the line. The turnstile remained locked, waiting for authorization like a machine that understood obedience better than humans did. Harris's jaw tightened. He had wanted a guilty flinch. He had wanted stammering. He had wanted submission. Instead, he had been given a clean refusal. The building watched, and in its watching, it granted him permission. The cameras blinked red, steady as a pulse. The lobby's marble absorbed sound without softness. The security tray sat between them, scarred plastic, holding the woman's ordinary objects like offerings. And in that bright, clinical stillness under light designed to erase complexity, the first misunderstanding hardened into something more permanent. Not a question, a conclusion. The scene, from above, would have looked simple. A uniformed officer, an older woman, a bag, a gate, a line of witnesses, a geometry of power, cleanly drawn. And that was the danger. Because the system loved simplicity, the way fire loved oxygen feeding on it, growing clean and unstoppable, leaving behind only ash and paperwork. The refusal did not echo loudly, but it traveled. It slipped under the edges of the counters and into the seams of the lobby like cold air, finding every place people were trying not to feel. The building did not react the way a human would, with surprise, or shame, or curiosity. It reacted the way a system reacts when a gear slips, by tightening. Officer Harris stood still for half a beat, as if waiting for his own authority to settle back into place. The fluorescent light glazed his badge and washed his face into something flatter, harder. The radio earpiece coiled against his ear, a small black worm feeding him the logic of procedures. He did not need a voice in it to hear the message anyway. Control is safety. Compliance is innocence. Resistance is threat. The older woman remained where she was, her badge held, but not offered. Her posture did not tilt toward apology. She did not make herself small. She did not glance at the bystanders for help, because she understood something the lobby trained into everyone. No one wanted to be recruited into trouble. The turnstile waited between them, metal arms crossed like a judgment, its card reader blinking green, and then going dim again, impatient for a swipe. A gate that decided who belonged, not by character, not by truth, but by a piece of laminated plastic and the system behind it. Harris stepped closer. "You didn't hear me," he said. The line behind the stanchions shifted, bodies rearranging for a better angle without admitting it. The man with the phone held it a little higher, screen tilted as if by accident. A woman in a blazer stared at the floor, lips pressed tight, as though her silence might absolve her. The older woman's eyes stayed on Harris. "I heard you," she said. A sentence shaped like a wall, not loud, not argumentative, simply intact. Harris's gaze flicked to the handbag again, then to her coat. He was building an internal report in real time, assembling the story he would later tell into the pieces he was already seeing. The story required a villain. The story required urgency. The story required him as the correct response. "Security alert came in," he said. "You matched the description." The word match was a sleight of hand. It implied precision where there was only coincidence. It implied investigation where there was only projection. Older woman did not glance down at herself as if surprised to be inhabiting the wrong body. "What description?" she asked. 2 words too many. It was a reasonable question. In a moral universe, it would have been met with information, with caution, with the possibility that someone might be wrong. Here, it was met with irritation. Harris's mouth tightened into something that was almost a smile, but lacked warmth. "Older female," he said, and the phrase landed with blunt casualness. "Gray coat, carrying a bag." He said it like he was reading off a grocery list, like the reduction of a person into 3 traits was normal, like it was not a violence in itself. The older woman's expression did not change, but the air around her did. A calm settled into her face that had an edge to it, now sharper than patience, cleaner than anger. The kind of calm that comes when you recognize you are not being spoken to as a person, but as a problem. That's not a description, she said. That's an excuse. The lobby did not like that sentence. It was a moral claim, and moral claims were disruptive. They threatened the building's preferred language procedure, neutrality, the cold comfort of policy. Harris felt the sentence land on him like an insult because he had been trained to confuse his role with righteousness. He lifted his chin. His shoulders widened. The polished shoes shifted, squeaking faintly against the stone. A small sound, like a warning. Step away from the turnstile, he said. She could have complied and ended the moment. The lobby offered that bargain to everyone. Surrender your dignity, and you may pass. Perform submission, and the system will grant you speed. She did not take the bargain. Her hand moved. Not toward him, not toward her bag, but toward the reader. She raised her badge again. It was still partly obscured by her fingers, the photo visible only in slivers. She did not shove it into his face. She did not plead with it. She simply positioned it, as if stating a fact the turnstile could accept, even if the man could not. I have clearance, she said. There was no pride in it, no threat, just the cold correctness of a credential. Harris leaned in, trying to see the badge. His eyes narrowed, scanning the edges of the laminate, as though truth might be hiding in the corners. But the badge was not offered for inspection. It remained in her space, under her control. His radio crackled. A burst of static, and then a voice distant, clipped, shaped by habit. Harris, you got eyes on the suspect. Suspect. The word arrived already stamped with guilt. It arrived as a conclusion, not a question. The radio did what radios were designed to do. It removed doubt by replacing it with expectation. Harris touched the earpiece with 2 fingers. A gesture so practiced it looked like thought. I'm with her now, he said, gaze locked on the woman. The older woman heard the word her, and did not flinch. But something in her eyes tightened. An internal calculation, a shift in strategy. The system had already named her. That naming had weight. It made everything she did afterward look like proof. The voice on the radio responded, detain and verify. Don't let her through. Detain and verify. A phrase that sounded clean, almost reasonable, until you saw what it meant in a human body. It meant stopping someone not because you knew, but because you suspected. It meant withholding freedom as a method of investigation. It meant treating restraint as guilt. Harris's gloved hand, black synthetic, tight at the wrist, lifted slightly, hovering in the air between them. The glove was a kind of costume. It suggested professionalism, distance, hygiene. It promised that whatever came next would be by the book. But gloves also made it easier to forget skimp, easier to forget that touch was intimate, that force was personal. Ma'am, he said again. And now he gave the word a hardness like a tool. I'm not asking. He waited. The older woman did not move. She did not raise her voice. She did not appeal to the crowd. She stood in the light as if she had decided, very carefully, not to perform for it. That, to Harris, looked like guilt. That, to the lobby, looked like permission. He shifted his stance, so his body blocked the turnstile. The machine's green light blinked and went dark. A small, obedient failure. The gate had chosen him. You're delaying security operations, he said, and the sentence sounded like a charge, like a statute. Step aside. She looked past him, just briefly toward the elevators, the counters, the flags, the building's cold mouth. Then she looked back. No, she said again. The silence that followed was not empty. It was packed tight with the weight of every witness choosing not to intervene. It pressed against the glass walls, against the marble, against the cameras. It was thick enough to measure. Harris exhaled through his nose. Slow, controlled, as if he were containing something noble. His hand moved, not fast, not frantic. It moved with the careful confidence of someone who believed the system would protect him afterward. He reached for her elbow. The first contact was almost gentle. The glove closed around the sleeve of her coat, fingertips pressing into fabric, finding bone beneath. It was an intimate grip disguised as procedure. Acclaiming. The woman's body reacted in a way most people in that lobby could not read. She did not jerk away like prey. She did not fold. Her shoulder angled. Her weight shifted. Her feet adjusted small, trained movements that minimized vulnerability. She protected herself. She kept her balance. For a moment, it was as if 2 different worlds had collided in the lobby. His world of assumption, her world of experience. Remove your hand, she said. Her voice was quiet. That quietness was not weakness. It was constraint. It carried the same moral clarity as a gavel. This is wrong. And you know it. Harris's grip tightened. He felt her steadiness and mistook it for arrogance. He felt her refusal and mistook it for threat. He did not recognize dignity when it did not come wrapped in the right kind of badge. I'm escorting you, he said, escorting, a euphemism that made force sound courteous. The older woman's gaze held him, steady as a fixed point in a moving room. You're detaining me, she corrected. A single sentence, sharp enough to cut through the lobby's manufactured neutrality. It named the act. It stripped away the softness of the language. It made it impossible for anyone listening to pretend this was polite. The bystanders did not move. The phones kept recording. The guard behind the counter stared at his monitor as though the X-ray image could offer him a moral exit. And the fluorescent light continued to shine, clean and unforgiving, illuminating every choice without changing any of them. Harris pulled. Not hard, not yet, but with intent. A tug to separate her from the turnstile, to remove her from passage, to turn her body into a problem off to the side. The stanchions that had guided the line now looked like rails for a capture, funneling her toward a corner of the checkpoint where the cameras had the best angle. She resisted, not with panic, not with spectacle. She resisted by staying upright, the simplest form of protest, and the most dangerous in a system that demanded submission. Harris's radio crackled again. Status? He pressed his earpiece, eyes still on her. Non-compliant, he said. Non-compliant. A word that meant everything and nothing. A word that turned dignity into a violation. The older woman did not speak now. She let silence do the work. Silence, in that moment, was not surrender. It was an indictment. It forced the lobby to sit with what was happening without the relief of argument. Harris filled the silence with his own certainty. He stepped closer, angling his body so he could control her path. His polished shoes flashed under the lights like small mirrors, reflecting the lobby back at itself, hard, bright, cold. Around them, the building held its shape. Glass walls, marble floors, cameras blinking. The system remained perfectly still as it moved toward violence. And that was the truth of it. Nothing in the lobby looked chaotic. Nothing looked out of control. The environment stayed clinical, orderly, almost serene. The only disorder was moral. From above through the dome, cameras, the scene would read as a neat sequence of authorized motions. Officer approaches. Subject refuses. Officer makes contact. Subject resists. The angles would flatten the human truth into a procedural narrative. The fluorescent light would bleach the bruise before it formed. In the building's version of events, the moment her elbow was seized would not be a crossing. It would be the beginning of justification. The moment broke, not with a shout, but with a decision. It lived for less than a second. Inside Officer Harris's body, a tightening of muscle, a narrowing of thought. The radio had given him a word. Non-compliant. The lobby had given him an audience. The system had given him permission. He acted. The movement was abrupt enough to tear time. One instant, the woman was upright, contained, her elbow caught in his grip. The next, the space between them collapsed. Harris lunged forward and down, his shoulder driving into her center of mass, with the force of training and assumption combined. There was a sound, small, involuntary, as the air left her lungs. It was not a scream. It was not a plea. It was breath, expelled too fast to be dignified. The marble floor rose to meet her with institutional indifference. Fabric slapped stone. Her handbag tore free from her shoulder and skidded across the lobby, spilling its contents in a modest scatter, keys ringing once before settling. The wallet flipping open, photographs flashing and then lying, face down like secrets, ashamed to be seen. The impact echoed more than it should have. The building was good at amplifying violence while pretending it wasn't happening. Harris's knee came down, hard, pinning her hip. His weight followed, practiced, efficient, a maneuver designed for control, not care. His gloved hands searched for leverage, for wrists, for compliance. The move was clean enough to look justified on camera. The marble was cold through her coat, shocking in its immediacy. It pressed into her ribs, her shoulder, her cheek. The chill cut through the noise and anchored her. In her body, she did not thrash, she did not flail. Her arms moved with precision, not to strike, not to claw, but to protect. One forearm came up, instinctively, shielding her head from the floor. Her chin tucked, her spine curved just enough to absorb impact. It was a small motion, barely visible under Harris's bulk, but it was unmistakably trained. That motion, so economical, so practiced, did not belong to panic. It belonged to someone who had learned, long ago, that floors were dangerous and that heads must be protected at all costs. It belonged to someone who had been knocked down before and survived by knowing exactly how dot around them. The lobby froze. Phones were raised higher now, no longer pretending. Screens glowed, reflecting the scene back in sterile rectangles. The bystanders did not shout. They did not rush forward. They did not intervene. They recorded dot. The cameras in the ceiling blinked red. Unblinking witnesses, with no capacity for mercy. They caught the angle of Harris's knee, the woman's cheek against the marble, the handbag sliding away like a body part severed from its owner. Behind the security counter, the guard stood halfway out of his chair, hands hovering uselessly in the air. He looked from Harris to the woman and back again, caught between hierarchy and conscience. He did not cross the counter. He did not call out. Rank held him still. "Stop resisting," Harris shouted. The words arrived late, after the violence, but they were essential. They provided narrative. They gave shape to what the cameras would later see. The older woman did not answer him. She could not yet. Her lungs were still relearning how to draw air. Each breath was a measured act, shallow at first, then deeper. The sound of it, if involuntary, was the truest thing in the room. Breath did not lie. Harris mistook the sound for a struggle. He shifted his weight, pressing harder, asserting dominance through pressure. The marble accepted everything without comment. The floor did not register innocence or guilt. It only offered itself as a surface. "Hands behind your back," he barked. Her hands did not move. Not because she refused. Because she was holding her head off the stone. That distinction did not matter to him. From the corner of the lobby, a security supervisor approached at a cautious pace, eyes darting between the officer and the phones. He did not kneel. He did not touch. He assessed optics before outcomes. "What's the status?" he asked. Harris did not look up. "She tried to flee," he said. The sentence was a fiction built on momentum. It needed to exist. Without it, the tackle would have no justification. With it, the system could exhale. The older woman found her breath fully now. She drew it in slow, controlled increments, grounding herself. Her cheek burned where it pressed against the stone. She tasted dust and something faintly metallic, old residue ground into marble over decades. "Officer," she said. Her voice was strained, but it was steady. "I am not resisting." The words were not loud enough to compete with authority. They were not designed to. They were simply true. Harris did not hear truth. He heard challenge. "Stop talking," he said. "You're making this worse." Making this worse, as if this were a natural state of affairs. As if violence were weather she had summoned by standing in the wrong place. His knee shifted again. Pain flared along her side, sharp but contained. She did not cry out. She catalogued it. She had learned long ago that pain acknowledged too loudly became a weapon for others. Her coat pulled tight across her chest, and beneath it, something shifted. The concealed badge, clipped to the inside lining, slid loose from its resting place. The laminate edge pressed against fabric, straining forward, as if the truth itself were impatient. The clip tugged. The badge rotated, invisible but present, a hard rectangle insisting on its existence. It did not fall free. Not yet. A woman near the elevators covered her mouth, eyes wide, phone shaking slightly in her hands. A man in a suit muttered something under his breath. Jesus or shit. It was hard to tell. Someone else whispered, "Is that necessary?" The question drifted uselessly into the air. The building did not answer questions. It only processed events. Harris reached for the woman's wrist, trying to force it behind her back. His grip tightened around bone and tendon. The glove removed any sense of skin, of warmth. He felt resistance and labeled it intent. She reacted without thinking. Her elbow tucked. Her shoulder rolled. She shifted her weight just enough to relieve pressure on her ribs. It was not an attack. It was survival. The motion was precise, controlled, economical. Harris felt it as defiance. "That's it," he said. "Breath sharp now. You're under arrest." For what? The charge did not matter yet. It would be invented later, shaped to fit the footage. Disorderly conduct. Obstruction. Failure to comply. The system had a vocabulary for this. The supervisor finally knelt, more for appearance than help. "Harris," he said quietly. "Easy. Easy. The word landed too late, and too softly. It was not an order. It was a suggestion offered to someone already committed to a narrative. Harris pressed down again, asserting control, asserting righteousness. His polished shoes were planted wide, now, bracing. The fluorescent light reflected off them in harsh flashes, catching in the camera lenses, making everything look cleaner than it was. The woman's breath came faster now, but still controlled. She focused on it, on the rhythm. In and out. In and out. She had used breath to survive interrogations, to endure hours that stretched longer than this moment. Breath was something the system could not confiscate. Look at her, someone whispered. The words traveled through the lobby, thin but urgent. Look at her. The sentence carried the possibility of recognition. No one moved closer. The phones continued to record, hands steadying as adrenaline settled into routine. Witness became content. Content became distance. The marble floor held the woman's body without yielding. It was cold legitimacy incarnate, a surface that suggested order, even as it bore witness to harm. It would later be wiped clean, polished until no trace remained. The older woman turned her face just enough to draw air more freely. Her eyes were open now, clear despite the pain. She did not search for help. She looked at Harris. You need to get off me, she said. Her voice was low, almost conversational. I'm telling you this once. The sentence landed between them, heavy with implication. It was not a threat shouted into chaos. It was a warning delivered into order. Harris laughed, a short, humorless sound. Yeah, he said. Or what? The badge inside her coat strained again, the clip biting into fabric. The truth wanted daylight. Around them, the building hummed. Elevators chimed somewhere above. A printer whirred behind the reception desk. Life continued with bureaucratic indifference. From the ceiling camera's perspective, the scene was nearly complete. Officer restraining suspect, bystanders compliant, environment controlled. The narrative was forming, pixel by pixel. What the cameras could not record was the weight of her restraint, the discipline it took not to escalate, not to reveal herself yet, not to tear the mask off the system in the lobby, where it would only provoke more violence. What they could not record was the sealed envelope of anger inside her, heavy and patient, waiting for the right room. The supervisor leaned closer now, voice lower. Harris, we've got enough. Let's move her. Move her. As if she were furniture, as if her body were an inconvenience to be relocated. Harris adjusted his grip, preparing to haul her up. The motion jostled her coat again. The inner lining tugged. The badge slipped lower, its corner pressing outward, a hard truth knocking against fabric. For just a second, a sliver of laminate caught the light. A flash. So brief it might have been imagined. But it was there. The woman felt it. She knew the badge was closer to exposure now than it had been moments before. She made a decision then, not with fear, not with haste, but with clarity. Not here. Not on the marble. Not under the cameras that would flatten everything. She went still. Complete stillness. Her body stopped adjusting, stopped compensating. She let her weight settle fully into the floor. She let Harris feel it, the sudden absence of motion, the unnerving calm. To him, it felt like surrender. To her, it was control. The lobby watched, phones raised, breath held. The building absorbed the scene, preparing to file it away. From a distance from above, the moment would read as a resolution. The suspect subdued, order restored, the system functioning as designed. But beneath Harris's knee, against the cold marble, the truth waited. And it was not done yet. By the time the room assembled, the violence had been laundered. It had passed through hallways and forms and whispered conversations until it emerged clean enough to be handled. The lobby was already being restored, marble wiped, stanchions realigned. The small spill of ordinary objects gathered and returned to anonymity. The building knew how to erase its own fingerprints. The hearing chamber waited on an upper floor, sealed behind heavy doors with sound-dampening seams. It was not a courtroom. It did not pretend to be dramatic. It was administrative by design, a place where harm was reduced to language, and language was used to manage consequences. The room was long and rectangular, paneled in pale wood, that suggested seriousness without warmth. A raised dais cut across one end, where 3 officials would sit in chairs engineered for posture and authority. In front of them, 2 tables faced forward, parallel and exposed, like specimens placed under glass. Microphones rose from each tabletop on thin black stems, angled toward mouths that would need permission to speak. Small nameplates rested at the edge of the tables, white with black lettering, clipped into holders that fixed identity into a single, stable line. On the dais, sealed water bottles stood in perfect symmetry, labels turned outward, caps unbroken, purity on display. No risk of contamination, no sign that anyone here would sweat. Flags flanked the room. They hung without movement, fabric heavy and obedient, symbols drained of friction by repetition. They had witnessed worse than this and never reacted. The older woman was brought in first. She walked on her own. That detail mattered to her, even if it would never appear in the record. Her coat had been returned. Her handbag was back on her shoulder, its contents restored, though the zipper now snagged slightly where it had been yanked. A faint bruise bloomed along her side, deepening beneath fabric, unseen but present. Her posture was straight, not defiant, not performative, simply intact. She took her seat at the table marked subject. The nameplate in front of her did not carry her name. It read only that word, printed in crisp, neutral type. Subject, as if she were a matter to be examined, not a person who had been thrown to the floor. She looked at it for a moment, then away. Across the room, Officer Harris entered, with two men in suits, legal counsel, posture slightly bent toward him, voices low. His uniform had been replaced with a pressed jacket and tie. The polished shoes were still there, but dulled now by carpet. He did not look at her as he sat at the opposite table. His nameplate read Officer Harris. The distinction mattered. The officials filed in last. They moved with the quiet confidence of people accustomed to deciding things that would affect others more than themselves. One woman, two men, all wore the same expression. Grave, attentive, untroubled. The chair at the center of the dais leaned toward the microphone. "This hearing is now in session," he said. His voice filled the room easily. The acoustics favored authority. "This concerns an incident that occurred this morning in the main lobby." Incident. The word did a great deal of work. The older woman folded her hands on the table. Her fingers were steady. She felt the bruise again, as she shifted slightly. A dull reminder beneath the surface. She welcomed it. Pain was proof that something real had happened. No matter how the language tried to soften it, the chair continued. "Our purpose here is fact-finding. We are not here to assign blame." That sentence landed like a practiced lie. Harris's counsel leaned toward him, murmuring something. Harris nodded once, jaw tight. He had been coached already. The phrases were ready. He would say perceived threat. He would say standard procedure. He would say in the interest of safety. The system loved men who could speak its dialect fluently. The microphone in front of Harris blinked green. He cleared his throat. "I responded to a security alert," he began. "I observed a subject matching the description. When I attempted to verify her identity, she became non-compliant." The words came out smooth, polished by repetition. They floated into the room, weightless. "She refused lawful commands," he continued. "I believed she posed a potential risk to the facility." Believed. Potential. Risk. Each word was a rung in a ladder designed to lift responsibility, away from the body on the floor and into the abstract. The older woman listened without interruption. She did not shake her head. She did not smile. Her silence was not acquiescence. It was restraint. She knew how easily interruption could be reframed as disruption. The chair turned his gaze toward her. "You'll have an opportunity to respond," he said, as if granting a favor. The microphone in front of her remained dark. Harris's counsel spoke next, refining the narrative. The officer acted within the scope of his training. Any force applied was proportional and necessary given the subject's behavior. Necessary. The word echoed faintly in the wood-paneled room. The chair nodded, scribbling notes that would later justify themselves. He looked at the older woman again. "Your response." A pause. The room leaned forward without moving. The overhead lights were brighter here than in the lobby, angled downward to eliminate shadows. There was no place for ambiguity to hide. It was interrogation lighting, disguised as procedure. The microphone in front of her remained dark. She did not reach for it. Instead, she reached into a coat. The motion was unhurried, deliberate. Harris stiffened visibly, his eyes flicking to her hands before he caught himself. One of the officials shifted in his seat. From the inside lining, she withdrew the badge. This time, she did not keep it close. She placed it on the table and slid it forward, directly beneath the microphone. The laminate caught the light and held it. The seal was unmistakable. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Her photograph stared back at the room with a calm, unyielding expression. Her name printed below it in block letters. Her clearance level, encoded in colors and numbers that meant nothing to civilians and everything to systems. The room changed temperature, not physically, morally. The chair leaned forward, eyes narrowing. One of the men beside him reached instinctively for the badge, then stopped himself. Harris's counsel went still. Harris's face drained of something certainty, perhaps, or protection. "I am a special agent with the FBI," the woman said. Her voice was even, not raised, not triumphant. "I was present in the building, pursuant to an internal directive related to an ongoing corruption investigation." She let the words settle. They were heavy enough on their own. "I did not identify myself in the lobby, because my presence there was not meant to be visible." Silence. The microphones hummed faintly. The sealed water bottles did not move. The flags remained obedient. The chair cleared his throat. This was not indicated in the preliminary report. No, she said. It wasn't. The sentence did not accuse, it corrected. One of the officials glanced down at the badge again, then back at her. Why didn't you comply when the officer requested verification? She met his eyes. Because he didn't request verification, she said. He issued commands based on a description so broad, it functioned as bias. I refused to consent to an unlawful detention. The words were precise, legal, unemotional. The system bristled. Harris's counsel leaned in urgently. With respect, the officer had no way of knowing that, she said gently, is the point. The chair raised a hand, cutting off further interruption. His voice returned, cooler now. This revelation is significant, but not transformative. The system did not collapse. It adjusted. This hearing will recess, he continued, to allow us to review jurisdictional protocols. Review protocols. The machinery word into motion. No apology was offered. No acknowledgement of harm. The badge had flipped the dynamic, but it had not pierced the shell. The institution did not blush. It reca, liberated. As people stood, chairs scraping softly against carpet, the older woman gathered her badge and clipped it to her coat on the outside this time. The ID rested against the fabric. Visible, unambiguous. Authority unveiled. Not bestowed. Harris did not look at her, as he was guided out by counsel, already being reassured that this would be managed. His nameplate remained on the table, face down now, as if embarrassed. The woman remained seated for a moment longer. After the room emptied, she looked at the empty dais, the microphones, the water bottles still sealed. The bruise along her side throbbed, a quiet reminder beneath the language and procedure. She pressed her palm against it briefly, not in pain, but in recognition. Then she stood. As she left the hearing room, the overhead lights clicked softly, adjusting for absence. The flags did not move. The system prepared to digest the truth without changing its appetite. From the outside, it would look like accountability. From within, it was something colder. Absorption. The bruise bloomed in private. It darkened over the next 48 hours, spreading like a map beneath her skin, purple, deepening to blue, blue edging toward yellow. It followed the line of Harris's knee with anatomical precision, a truth her body kept even as language worked to erase it. She studied it once each morning, not with fascination, but with the discipline of documentation. Evidence mattered, even when no one asked for it. The institution moved faster than the healing. Internal memos circulated before the bruise reached its deepest color. Carefully worded emails with subject lines like clarification of incident protocols and commitment to safety review. They spoke of lessons learned without naming the lesson. They apologized without apologizing. The language was padded, symmetrical, designed to offend no one who mattered. One memo praised Harris's years of service. Another emphasized the complexity of modern security environments. None mentioned the sound of breath leaving a body. None mentioned marble. The media found the footage. Phone videos stitched together into a single looping narrative. The tackle replayed from 3 angles, slowed down, zoomed in, annotated by voices that argued over meaning while never touching it. Commentators debated perception and split-second decisions. Panels nodded gravely. Headlines asked questions they already answered. Was force justified? Misunderstanding or misconduct? Age, authority, and assumptions. The woman's name was withheld at first. An older civilian, a bystander, a woman of unclear affiliation. When her identity surfaced, it landed like a correction, not a reckoning. FBI agent involved in lobby incident. Involved, as if she had collided with the system accidentally. Requests poured in statements, interviews, exclusive appearances. The easy ending assembled itself around her, glossy and seductive. The righteous speech, the moral victory. The system embarrassed into change by a single revelation. She declined all of it. She answered only what was required. Only in rooms where the doors closed and the microphones belonged to no one who would edit her meaning. Her refusals confused people. They mistook restraint for reluctance, silence for weakness. They had always misunderstood silence. Inside her office, windowless, functional, she opened the case file. It began as an incident report. It became something else. She mapped the lobby not as a scene of violence, but as a node. She traced Harris not as a villain, but as a vector. Training modules, performance evaluations, complaint histories quietly settled. Patterns in stop data that had been justified, normalized, filed away. She followed the badge. Hers, theirs, the system's badges. Who wore them openly? Who hid behind them? Who never had them to begin with? She noticed how often suspicion flowed downhill, how rarely it climbed. She noticed how language bent to protect posture. Harris appeared again and again. Not exceptional, not monstrous, typical, a symptom with a uniform. She did not pursue him for vengeance. She pursued the architecture that had shaped him. The memos, the metrics, the incentives that rewarded certainty over curiosity. She pulled threads carefully, patiently, letting the case expand the way truth often did, until it couldn't be contained. In meetings, apologies were offered to her personally. They were careful apologies, narrow, designed to end conversations. We regret your experience. We're committed to ensuring this doesn't happen again. Of course, you understand the pressures our officers face. She listened. She nodded. She said very little. Her badge hung from a lanyard now, visible when she walked the halls. Not as armor. As a reminder, authority could open doors. It could also tighten around the neck, if worn without thought. At night, when the building emptied and the lights dimmed to their lowest sanctioned glow, she loosened the lanyard and rubbed the bruise absently, fingers tracing the fading outline. The pain was less now, but the memory remained sharp. She let it. Justice, she knew, was not an event. It was labor. Weeks later, she returned to a lobby. Not the same one. Another building. Another city. Same geometry. Glass and marble. Stanchions and signage. Fluorescent light flattened the space into something deceptively calm. Cameras blinked in their corners. Patient as ever. Mid-morning again. She stood near the perimeter this time. Unremarkable. Coat plain. Posture relaxed. Her badge was tucked away. She was not the subject today. A person approached security. Not old. Not young. Someone forgettable by design. Their shoes were worn, not polished. Their bag, unremarkable. They moved with the faint hesitation of someone who knew they did not belong here, or believed they did not. The line funneled them forward. A patrol officer watched the system, HUMMED. She observed everything: the angle of the officer's stance, the set of his shoulders, the way his gaze lingered on the bag a second too long. She watched the turnstile blink green, then dim. She watched the security tray slide forward like an offering. Nothing happened. The person passed through, retrieved their belongings, walked on. The lobby exhaled without knowing it had held its breath. She felt no triumph, only resolve. The system had not changed its posture. The lights were still cold. The cameras still blinked without conscience. The architecture still favored control over care, but it was being watched now by her. By others she had quietly brought into the work. By files that no longer sat dormant. Observation was not justice, but it was a beginning. She turned to leave. As she passed the cameras, she did not look up. She never did. Some habits were earned. Some silences were chosen. Outside, daylight cut differently than fluorescent light. It made shadows. It allowed depth. She stepped into it. Badge secure, bruise fading, work unfinished. Behind her, the lobby continued as it always had, clean, controlled. Confident. And somewhere between the glass and the marble, between the badge and the bruise, the truth waited. Not for spectacle, for pressure.